In this demonstration, we're going to look at boundaries and boundary groups. A boundary is a network location, and a boundary group is a collection of networks. Now, that network could be a physical site, or it could be something like an IP subnet. In order to actually create these boundaries and boundary groups, we can do it in one of two ways. We can either do it automatically based off an Active Directory discovery, or we can do it manually by right-clicking on boundaries and saying create a new boundary. To start with, what we'll have a look at here is just using the Active Directory forest discovery method to create our boundaries. If I come to my hierarchy configuration, expand up the triangle, have a look at boundaries, we can see currently I've got it Demo7. Doesn't really mean anything at this point here. Based off this theoretical company that I'm dealing with, they're based in London. They also have locations in Australia and also in Canada, so ideally we'd like to add in those network locations. Then boundary groups, like we said, are just collections. So what we have here is we already have a boundary group called London. And if we just look at this boundary group, what we can see is when we come to the properties, we can see a Demo7 is currently in there. So we'll select OK. We'll come to our discovery methods and we'll go for our Active Directory forest discovery. We'll right click, come to our properties. Then what we'll do is we'll enable our Active Directory forest discovery, and I'm going to automatically create Active Directory site boundaries when they're discovered. And we're going to do that every week. So we're going to have a look at any new Active Directory sites that are created and create boundaries based off those sites. We'll select OK. We will run the discovery now, so we'll say yes. And what we'll do is we'll just leave that to run through. And what we should find in a few minutes, we should see some additional boundaries. So while we're waiting for that to occur, let's just go to boundaries and let's just have a look. And as we can see, we now have Sydney and Toronto, so they've now populated in. What we can also do is we can create boundaries manually. So if I right click at this point here, we'll create a boundary. I need to give the boundary a description. I'm just going to call mine VPN boundary, and the type of boundary we are going to create can be based off an IP subnet, so that would be an IP address plus a subnet mask. We can also base off an Active Directory site, so we've already done that automatically by using the Active Directory forest discovery. We could use an IP version 6 prefix, so if I summarise that down, that's really just an IP version 6 subnet. And then finally, if we have a huge subnet, we can specify an address range within that subnet. So what we're going to do for purposes of this demo, we'll go for an IP subnet. We'll specify the network, and the network in our case is 10.10.3.0. Then we'll specify the subnet mask, and we'll go for 255.255.255.0. And as you can see, it automatically fills in my subnet ID. Now we've done that, we'll just select OK. And then what we've done is we've manually created a new boundary. So as already mentioned, boundary groups are just collections of boundaries. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come to London. I'm just going to right click on London, just come down to properties, and then on the properties what we're going to do here is we're just going to add in an additional boundary. So select our add button. I'm just going to add in my VPN boundary and select OK. Then what we have is if we have a look at the references tab, as we say, as it says here, we will use this boundary group for site assignment, and anybody that's in that network location will be added automatically to S01 datum site. Their site system servers will be lon-cfg.datum.com. If we look at the relationships tab, what we have is we have the fallback boundary group. And the fallback boundary group, as it says up the top here, just allows me to specify which boundary group we'll communicate with in the case of failure of the resources within this boundary group. Then we have our options tab. So on our options tab, we can allow peer downloads in this boundary group. So at this point here, we can use things, for example, like the config manager client cache, or we could be using something, for example, like a branch cache. We've then got our security tab, and on our security tab, we have who has permissions to actually manage this boundary group. So what we'll do at this point here is we'll just select OK. And if we have a look, what we've now got is we've now added an additional site into London. To create a new boundary group, all we do is come to boundary groups, right click and create a boundary group. And what we'll do for this one is we create a boundary group for Australia. And what we're going to do is we'll select our add button, and what we'll do is we'll add in Sydney. We'll select OK, and we'll select OK. And then what we'll do at this point here, in the case of any issues with any of the services running in Australia, what we'll do is we'll specify a fallback location to be London. So we'll come back into Australia, we'll go to the properties, and then what we'll do is we'll just come to our relationships tab. In our relationships tab, we'll specify add. Now what we'll do at this point here is we'll add in London. So the fallback time in minutes, so distribution point, we'll wait 120 minutes. Software update point, 120 minutes, and in the case of the management point, basically 0 minutes, and then we'll select OK. So what we've done at this point here is we're seeing if any of these services fail within Australia, we'll fall back to the London boundary group and we'll use the distribution point and the software update point and potentially the management point from our Australia boundary group. We'll select OK. We've now got Australia, London, we've created a boundary, we've set up automatic discovery of Active Directory sites, and that's the end of this demonstration. Thank you.